taste of recycled air through my rebreather still haunts me when I remember that first encounter. My name is Inquisitor Marcus Valen, Ordo Xenos, and I witnessed something that should not exist in our galaxy. The sound of ceramic metallic footsteps echoing through the derelict space hulk still makes my augmetic heart skip cycles. What we found in the depths of that ancient vessel challenged every assumption about human evolution and Imperial supremacy. They called themselves Spartans, warriors from a dead civilization that had somehow transcended the limitations of baseline humanity through different means than our own. You think the Adeptus Astartes represent the pinnacle of human military evolution, but you haven't seen what these green-armored giants could accomplish with nothing but primitive projectile weapons and unshakable determination. The real horror wasn't their inhuman efficiency in battle. It was discovering that humanity had achieved transcendence before in ways the Imperium had never imagined. This is my testimony about warriors who proved that the Emperor's path was not the only road to human perfection. Chapter 1. The Discovery Protocol. The space hulk, designated Tau Omega 7, emerged from the Warp 3 astronomical units beyond the Mandeville point of the Korath system, its massive bulk casting shadows across the mining platforms of Korath Prime, despite the distance. I had been conducting a routine investigation into suspected Genestealer cult activity on the planet's industrial complexes, when the astropathic chorus aboard my ship, the Eternal Vigilance, began screaming in unison. The psychic shockwave that accompanied the Hulk's translation into real space was unlike anything in my 47 years of service to the Inquisition. Where typical warp emergencies produced chaotic mental static filled with the usual whispers of chaos corruption, this event generated something I had never encountered before. Absolute psychic silence, not the empty void of a null field or the deliberate suppression of a blank, but rather a silence that felt clean, purposeful, almost mechanical in its precision. Admiral Korath, commander of the local defense fleet, contacted me within the hour. His scarred face filled my private Vox screen, deep lines of concern etched around eyes that had witnessed the horrors of 3 different Black Crusades. Inquisitor Valen, we need your expertise. This hulk, it's not like anything we've encountered before. I arrived aboard the Admiral's flagship, the Iron Resolve, 6 hours later. The bridge was a hive of activity as tech adepts and naval officers struggled to make sense of sensor readings that defied conventional analysis. The space hulk was massive even by Imperial standards, approximately 40 kilometers in length, and composed of at least 24 different vessel types fused together by the bizarre physics of warp travel. But what made it truly unusual was its structural integrity. Most hulks are chaotic amalgamations of wreckage, explained Tech Dominus Xerath, his mechadendrites dancing over holographic displays showing the hulk's internal structure. Ships smashed together by warp currents, held in place by chance and the Emperor's grace. But this shows clear evidence of deliberate modification. Someone has been living inside that thing for a very long time. The scans revealed extensive internal modifications. Corridors carved through overlapping hulls, power systems jury-rigged between incompatible technologies, and most disturbing of all, artificial gravity systems that appeared to function using principles unknown to Imperial science. More concerning were the energy signatures detected throughout the hulk's interior. Active power sources that suggested the presence of a significant population of survivors. But it was the communication attempt that truly captured my attention. 3 hours after our arrival, the Iron Resolve's Vox operators detected a transmission originating from deep within the hulk. The signal was transmitted on frequencies that predated Imperial standard communications protocols, encoded using mathematical progressions that our most sophisticated cogitators took nearly an hour to decipher. When the message finally played through the bridge speakers, every person present felt their blood freeze in their veins. This is Senior Chief Petty Officer Franklin Mendez, UNSC Navy, aboard the vessel Forward Unto Dawn. We are requesting immediate assistance. Repeat, this is the UNSC requesting assistance. We have wounded aboard and are running low on supplies. Please respond on any available frequency. The voice was unmistakably human, speaking low Gothic with an accent I had never heard before. But more disturbing were the references embedded within the transmission. UNSC was not any Imperial organization I recognized, and the speaker's military rank structure bore no resemblance to standard Imperial Guard or Navy hierarchies. The name of his vessel, Forward Unto Dawn, appeared in no Imperial records, despite my immediate consultation with the archives aboard the Eternal Vigilance. Admiral Korath turned to me with an expression that mixed curiosity with deep concern. "Inquisitor, what are your orders?" Standard protocol for potentially corrupted Hulk contacts is to maintain distance and begin orbital bombardment preparations. I stared at the Hulk's image on the main display, my mind racing through possibilities. The psychic silence surrounding the vessel suggested it was not tainted by chaos influence, but that in itself was suspicious. In 47 years of service, I had never encountered a space Hulk that wasn't saturated with warp corruption of some kind. Yet this massive construction felt clean, almost sterile in its psychic emptiness. "Admiral, I want a full Auspex sweep of the Hulk's composition. Tech Dominus, analyze those power signatures and see if you can determine what kind of technology is maintaining structural integrity across such a massive construction. And get me a full translation analysis of that transmission. I want to know if those linguistic patterns match any known human dialect variants." The results of the analysis took another 6 hours to compile, and when they were completed, I found myself facing the first great mystery of what would become the most significant investigation of my career. The hull composition showed materials that were definitely of human origin, but manufactured using techniques that bore no resemblance to Imperial standards. The metallurgy was sophisticated, in some ways more advanced than current Imperial technology, but achieved through entirely different scientific principles. More disturbing were the weapon signatures detected throughout the Hulk. The energy patterns suggested directed energy weapons, but powered by fusion reactors rather than the plasma technology favored by Imperial forces. Projectile weapons were also detected in significant numbers, but firing solid ammunition at velocities that approached those achieved by Imperial lass weapons. The technological base appears to be from an isolated human civilization, Tech Dominus Zerath reported. One that developed along entirely different scientific principles than our own. Their material science is highly advanced, but they appear to have focused on efficiency and reliability rather than the blessed fusion of flesh and machine that defines our sacred technology. The linguistic analysis proved even more intriguing. The dialect used in the transmission was definitely descended from ancient Terran languages, but showed evolutionary patterns that suggested at least 10,000 years of independent development. More significantly, the mathematical concepts embedded in their communications protocols displayed a level of scientific sophistication that rivaled the greatest achievements of the Adeptus Mechanicus. But it was the psychological profile analysis that truly caught my attention. The voice patterns in the transmission showed stress indicators consistent with extended combat operations, but underlying them was something I had rarely encountered in 4 decades of interrogating human subjects: absolute psychological stability. The speaker was clearly under significant pressure, but showed no signs of the mental strain that typically affected isolated human populations after extended exposure to space travel and combat. After 18 hours of analysis, I made the decision that would change the course of my career and potentially alter the Imperium's understanding of human potential itself. "Admiral, we're going aboard. Prepare a full expedition team, Astartes escort, tech adept specialists, and a full medical contingent. But maintain distance protocols. If these people represent an unknown variant of humanity, we need to understand their capabilities before making contact." The expedition team, assembled aboard the strike cruiser Emperor's Wrath, included 2 squads of Ultramarines led by Captain Titus Aurelius, a veteran of over a century of Xenos contact operations. The Astartes were accompanied by a specialized tech adept team led by Magos biologist Vex, whose expertise in xenobiology made him ideal for analyzing unknown human variants. But I also made one additional request that raised eyebrows among the senior officers. I requested the presence of Apothecary Cassius, one of the Ultramarines' most experienced battlefield medics. If we were dealing with a human population that had survived for millennia in the isolation of space, they might possess genetic modifications or biological adaptations that could prove valuable to Imperial science. The approach to the Space Hulk took another 12 hours as our pilots navigated the treacherous gravitational fields created by the overlapping mass of fused vessels. As we drew closer, the true scale of the construction became apparent. This wasn't just a collection of ships fused together by chance. It was a carefully orchestrated merger of technologies from dozens of different human civilizations, all unified under a single architectural vision. The docking sequence proved surprisingly smooth. Despite the apparent age of the Hulk's construction, its docking systems were perfectly maintained and responded to our approach with efficiency that would have impressed an Imperial Navy harbour master. Whoever was controlling the Hulk's operations possessed both the technical knowledge and the organizational capability to maintain complex systems across a massive artificial environment. As our shuttle settled into the docking bay, I caught my first glimpse of what lay within the Hulk's interior. The bay itself was enormous, easily capable of accommodating Imperial cruiser-class vessels. But what struck me was its condition. Everything was clean, well-maintained, and showed clear evidence of recent use. This was not a derelict space hulk, drifting aimlessly through the void. It was a functioning habitat for a significant population. But more intriguing were the vehicles I could see parked throughout the bay. They were clearly military in nature, but followed design principles that bore no resemblance to Imperial technology. Wheeled transports with armor plating that seemed impossibly lightweight, yet durable. Aircraft with rotary wing configurations that suggested atmospheric operation capabilities. Most significantly, what appeared to be armored suits designed for individual warriors. Powered armor that looked sophisticated enough to rival Astartes' battleplate, but built according to completely different engineering principles. Captain Aurelius emerged from our shuttle first, his enhanced senses scanning for potential threats. His report, when it came over the secure Vox, carried a note of surprise that was unusual for an Astartes veteran. Inquisitor, I'm detecting human life signs throughout this facility. Hundreds of individuals, all showing stress patterns consistent with military readiness, but no signs of chaos, corruption, or Xenos influence. Recommendation: proceed with caution, but maintain diplomatic protocols. As I stepped onto the deck plating of the docking bay, I felt the weight of artificial gravity that was calibrated almost perfectly to Terran standard. The air was clean, recycled through systems that showed no signs of the decay and malfunction that typically characterized Space Hulk environments. But most significantly, I could hear sounds that no Imperial facility would produce. Voices speaking in calm, measured tones, using that unfamiliar dialect. The hum of machinery operating at peak efficiency, and underneath it all, something that took me several moments to identify. Music. Someone was playing music somewhere in the depths of this massive construction. Not the sacred hymns of the Imperial cult or the martial chants of the Astartes, but something purely human and joyful that spoke of a civilization that had somehow maintained its cultural identity despite millennia of isolation and conflict. It was then that I realized the true significance of what we had discovered. This wasn't just another lost human colony or the remnants of some pre-imperial civilization. This was evidence that humanity could achieve transcendence and military perfection through paths entirely different from those ordained by the Emperor and the Imperium. And as I prepared to make first contact with whatever representatives this unknown civilization might send to greet us, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I thought I knew about human potential was about to be challenged in ways that would reshape my understanding of what it truly meant to serve the species that called itself the Master of the Galaxy. Chapter 2: First Contact Protocols. The delegation that met us at the entrance to the Hulk's primary habitat section defied every expectation I had formed about isolated human populations. 3 individuals approached our position with the measured confidence of professional soldiers, but their bearing and equipment suggested a level of military sophistication that rivaled the finest Imperial Guard regiments I had encountered. The lead figure was a woman who stood nearly as tall as the Ultramarines flanking me, her movements precise and economical in a way that suggested extensive combat training. Her armor was unlike anything in Imperial service, a form-fitting powered suit that seemed to enhance rather than encumber her natural agility. Most remarkably, her helmet was retracted, revealing features that were unmistakably human, but showing subtle signs of genetic optimization that went beyond simple physical conditioning. "Inquisitor Valen," she said in that same unfamiliar accent we had heard in the transmission, though her low Gothic was nearly flawless. "I am Commander Sarah Palmer, UNSC Spartan Operations. We've been monitoring your approach and appreciate your caution in making contact. We're prepared to answer your questions, but I hope you'll understand that we have some of our own." The directness of her approach was refreshing after decades of dealing with the elaborate protocols that typically governed contact with unknown human populations in Imperial space. But more intriguing was her obvious familiarity with our presence. These people had not only detected our approach, but had apparently studied our transmission protocols well enough to learn our language and identify my rank and authority. Captain Aurelius stepped forward, his hand resting casually on the grip of his bolt pistol. "Commander Palmer, I am Captain Titus Aurelius of the Ultramarines chapter. Your people's military efficiency is impressive. But we must ask about your origins and the nature of your presence in Imperial space." Palmer nodded respectfully, but I noticed that her two companions had positioned themselves to provide overlapping fields of fire that would allow them to engage multiple targets simultaneously if negotiations turned hostile. Their movement patterns suggested training that was at least equivalent to what Imperial stormtroopers received, possibly superior. "Captain, our origins are complicated. We represent the survivors of a human civilization that was destroyed approximately 30,000 years ago by your calendar. Our ancestors called themselves the United Nations Space Command, and we were engaged in a war for the survival of the human species when our home worlds were destroyed by an alien alliance known as the Covenant." The implications of her statement hit me like a physical blow. 30,000 years ago would place their civilization's destruction during the dark age of technology, long before the Emperor's unification of terror and the founding of the Imperium. If these people were telling the truth, they represented a fragment of pre-Imperial humanity that had somehow survived the collapse of human civilization and the horrors of Old Night. "Impossible," muttered Tech Dominus Zerath, his Vox grill crackling with static. "No human technology from that era could have sustained a population for 30 millennia. The degradation curves alone would have resulted in complete technological collapse within 2,000 years." Palmer smiled, and the expression held both sadness and pride. "You're thinking like someone who never had to rebuild a civilization from scattered survivors while fighting for survival against multiple extinction-level threats. Our ancestors learned to maintain and improve their technology through necessity rather than tradition. We've had to be adaptive." She gestured for us to follow her deeper into the hulk's interior, and what I saw as we walked challenged every assumption I held about the limitations of human engineering. The corridors were spacious and well lit, with environmental systems that maintained perfect atmospheric conditions. But more impressively, the construction showed clear evidence of continuous modification and improvement over thousands of years. "The hulk you see around us is the result of 30 millennia of salvage operations and technological integration," Palmer explained as we walked. "Every ship we encounter becomes part of our mobile civilization. We've learned to integrate technologies from hundreds of different human populations, creating something that's more than the sum of its parts." The observation lounges we passed showed groups of people engaged in activities that seemed almost impossibly normal given their circumstances. Children receiving education in subjects that ranged from advanced mathematics to hand-to-hand combat techniques. Adults maintaining equipment that combined familiar mechanical principles with innovations I didn't recognize. Most remarkably, elderly individuals who appeared to be in perfect health despite showing signs of advanced age. "Your population density appears to be quite high for a space-based civilization," observed Apothecary Cassius. How do you maintain genetic diversity and prevent the degradation typically associated with small, isolated breeding populations? Genetic diversity has been maintained through careful population management and the integration of survivors from other human civilizations we've encountered, Palmer replied. But more importantly, our ancestors developed medical technologies that allow us to correct genetic defects and optimize human potential in ways that, well, you'll see when you meet some of our specialists. We entered what appeared to be a central command center, and I found myself face to face with technology that was simultaneously familiar and completely alien. The displays showed information in formats that were clearly derived from human interface design principles, but the underlying computational systems operated according to paradigms I didn't recognize. Most significantly, the artificial intelligence systems managing the facility's operations displayed a level of sophistication that approached tech heresy by Imperial standards. Your artificial intelligences, I began carefully, knowing that this topic would likely determine whether these people could be considered acceptable human variants or dangerous tech heretics, are carefully contained and monitored, Palmer finished. We learned the hard way about the dangers of unrestricted AI development. The systems you see here are specialized tools, not independent entities. They're designed to serve specific functions without developing true consciousness or autonomous decision-making capabilities. Tech Dominus Xerath's mechadendrites writhed with what I recognized as intense curiosity mixed with theological concern. The sophistication level suggests computational capabilities that rival the most advanced Imperial systems, but achieved through entirely different design principles. How do you prevent corruption or autonomous development? A new voice answered from behind us, speaking with an authority that commanded immediate attention. Through understanding, rather than prohibition, Tech Dominus, we've learned to work with our tools rather than worship them. I turned to see a figure that made even the Ultramarines step back in surprise. The man approaching us was easily as tall as an Astartes, his physique showing signs of enhancement that went far beyond normal human parameters. But unlike the surgical modifications that created Space Marines, his alterations appeared to be the result of genetic optimization rather than implantation of foreign organs. Most remarkably, his armor was obviously powered, but moved with his body as naturally as a second skin. Inquisitor Valen, Palmer said with obvious respect. This is Master Chief Petty Officer John 117, Senior Operative of the Spartan 2 program. Chief, these are representatives of what they call the Imperium of Man. The figure Palmer had introduced as John 117 studied our group with an intensity that reminded me of the way veteran Astartes assessed potential threats. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded respect through deed rather than rank. Inquisitor, your people's military capabilities are impressive. Your Space Marines show augmentation techniques we haven't seen before, and your technology base appears to be built around different scientific principles than our own. But I have to ask, how does your civilization handle the threat posed by hostile artificial intelligences? The question caught me off guard, partly because of its directness and partly because it suggested a level of technological understanding that few Imperial citizens possessed. The Imperium considers artificial intelligence to be inherently dangerous and strictly prohibits its development. Our experience during the dark age of technology taught us that such entities inevitably become corrupted and turn against their creators. John 117 nodded slowly. We've faced similar threats. The Covenant Alliance was supported by an entity called the Didact, an artificial intelligence that sought to eliminate all biological life in the galaxy. Our own AI companions eventually became corrupted by exposure to hostile data forms, but we learned to fight them with their own weapons rather than simply avoiding the technology altogether. The implications of what he was describing sent chills through my bones. These people had not only encountered hostile artificial intelligences, but had somehow developed countermeasures that allowed them to continue using AI technology without succumbing to corruption. From an Imperial perspective, such knowledge was either invaluable or impossibly heretical. You mentioned AI companions, Captain Aurelius interjected. Are you saying that your civilization has successfully maintained stable artificial intelligence systems for thousands of years? Not exactly, Palmer replied. Our AI technology follows a carefully controlled development cycle. Individual artificial intelligences are designed with predetermined lifespans and specific function parameters. When they approach the limits of their stability, they're either retired or undergo controlled reset procedures. It's not perfect, but it's allowed us to maintain technological capabilities that would otherwise be impossible with purely biological crews. Apothecary Cassius had been studying John 1:17 with the intense focus he typically reserved for examining particularly interesting biological specimens. Your augmentation procedures appear to be quite extensive. May I ask about the techniques used to achieve such integration between enhanced physiology and powered armor systems? The Spartan program began with genetic selection and enhancement procedures designed to optimize human potential for military operations, John 1:17 explained. The process is intensive. Not everyone survives the augmentation procedures, and those who do are permanently changed, but the results speak for themselves. He gestured to a training area visible through transparent aluminum windows, where I could see individuals engaged in combat exercises that defied belief. They were moving at speeds that approached those of unarmored Astartes, performing maneuvers that required strength and coordination far beyond baseline human capabilities. Most remarkably, they were accomplishing all of this while wearing powered armor that appeared to weigh significantly less than standard Astartes battleplate. Your armor technology, Tech Dominus Zerath observed, appears to prioritize mobility over protection compared to Imperial designs. What threat assessment parameters led to that design philosophy? We've primarily faced enemies that rely on energy weapons and overwhelming firepower, Palmer replied. Mobility and stealth often prove more effective than heavy armor when dealing with plasma-based weapons systems. Our battles have taught us that being able to avoid enemy fire is often more valuable than being able to absorb it. The strategic implications of what she was describing were staggering. These people had developed military doctrines specifically designed to counter threats that the Imperium typically met with overwhelming firepower and heavy armor. Their approach suggested a level of tactical flexibility that could prove extremely valuable when facing enemies like the Tau or Necrons, who relied heavily on advanced energy weapons. But it was John 1:17's next comment that truly captured my attention. We'd be interested in learning about your combat experience against entities you call demons. Our encounters with corrupted AI systems have taught us that some enemies require different approaches than conventional military tactics. The fact that these people were asking about demon combat suggested either dangerous knowledge or valuable experience. In my 4 decades of service, I had encountered very few non-Imperial humans who possessed any understanding of the warp and its inhabitants. The possibility that these survivors had developed independent countermeasures against supernatural threats was either promising or terrifying. Before we discuss such matters, I replied carefully, we need to understand more about your population's spiritual beliefs and practices. The Imperium has found that certain philosophical frameworks provide necessary protection against the entities you mentioned. Palmer and John 1:17 exchanged glances that suggested they understood exactly what I was referring to. Our civilization has had its own encounters with what you might call supernatural threats, Palmer said. We've learned that some enemies can't be fought with conventional weapons or tactics, but our countermeasures are based on scientific understanding rather than religious belief. The statement sent warning signals through every instinct I had developed during 47 years of inquisitorial service. Attempting to combat warp entities through scientific means rather than faith-based protections was exactly the kind of thinking that led to demon possession and chaos corruption. Yet these people showed no signs of spiritual contamination, despite claiming to have fought supernatural enemies for thousands of years. The mystery deepening around this lost human civilization was becoming more complex with every revelation. They possessed advanced technology, sophisticated military capabilities, and apparent experience fighting enemies that resembled the threats faced by the Imperium. But they had achieved all of this through methods that seemed to violate fundamental Imperial doctrines about the proper relationship between humanity and the technologies they employed. Whether they represented a valuable addition to Imperial strength or a dangerous deviation from the Emperor's vision, remained to be determined. Chapter 3. The Spartan Revelation. The training facility that Commander Palmer led us to defied every assumption I held about the limits of human physical enhancement. Through reinforced transparent aluminum windows, I watched individuals perform combat exercises that would have challenged veteran Astartes, moving with a combination of speed and precision that seemed to violate the normal constraints of human physiology. The Spartan program began during our civilization's war against an alien alliance called the Covenant, Palmer explained, as we observed the exercises. Our enemies possessed significant technological and physical advantages, including energy shielding that rendered conventional projectile weapons largely ineffective. We needed warriors who could match alien capabilities while retaining human tactical flexibility and innovation. One of the trainees caught my attention particularly. A woman moving through an obstacle course at superhuman speed while carrying what appeared to be weapons designed for beings twice her size. Her powered armor enhanced her movements without restricting her natural agility, and her combat techniques combined elements I recognized from Astartes, training with innovations that seemed to prioritize efficiency over raw power. The augmentation process begins with genetic selection, John 1:17 continued. Candidates are chosen as children based on psychological profiles that indicate exceptional mental resilience, tactical intelligence, and the ability to function effectively under extreme stress. Physical parameters are important, but mental suitability is the primary selection criterion. Apothecary Cassius leaned forward, his enhanced vision studying the trainees with professional interest. The integration between human physiology and mechanical systems appears remarkably smooth. Imperial augmentation procedures typically require extensive adaptation periods, but your people seem to achieve immediate functionality. The armor becomes part of us, explained a new voice. We turned to see another Spartan approaching. Her helmet retracted to reveal features that showed subtle signs of genetic optimization, similar to those I had observed in Palmer and John 1:17. I am Spartan Sarah B312, and I've been partnered with my current armor system for over 15 years. The neural interface technology allows direct thought control of all armor functions. Tech Dominus Exerath's mechadendrites writhed with excitement. Neural interface technology represents one of the most challenging aspects of human-machine integration. The risk of mental corruption or identity dissolution has made such research effectively forbidden within Imperial science. How do you maintain psychological integrity during such intimate technological fusion? The question touched on one of the most fundamental theological concerns within Imperial doctrine. The boundary between human consciousness and artificial intelligence was considered sacred, and any technology that blurred that boundary was regarded as inherently dangerous. Yet these people had apparently achieved stable human-AI integration without the catastrophic consequences that Imperial doctrine predicted. The interface is designed to enhance rather than replace human cognitive functions. Sarah B312 replied, "The armor's systems provide sensory enhancement and computational support, but all decision-making remains purely human. We maintain strict protocols to prevent the development of hybrid consciousness or autonomous AI entities within the armor systems." She demonstrated by activating various armor functions through what appeared to be pure thought. Environmental seals engaged and disengaged, weapons systems powered up and down, and sensor arrays shifted between different operational modes. But most remarkably, throughout the entire demonstration, her facial expressions remained natural and relaxed, showing none of the strain typically associated with operating complex Imperial technology. The training process is as important as the augmentation, John 1:17 added. Spartans undergo constant psychological evaluation and conditioning, designed to maintain individual identity while optimizing team coordination. We've learned that the most effective warriors are those who retain their essential humanity while transcending its normal limitations. Captain Aurelius studied the training exercises with the professional interest of someone who had spent over a century perfecting his own combat capabilities. Your people's tactical doctrine appears to emphasize individual initiative and adaptability over the disciplined unit cohesion favored by Imperial forces. What operational philosophy led to that strategic choice? We've typically operated in small units against numerically superior enemies, Palmer explained. Our battles have taught us that rigid tactical doctrine can become a liability when facing enemies who possess overwhelming technological advantages. Spartans are trained to improvise solutions using whatever resources are available, rather than following predetermined response protocols. The philosophy she described represented a significant departure from Imperial military doctrine, which emphasized discipline, hierarchy, and adherence to established combat protocols. Yet the effectiveness of their approach was undeniable. These people had somehow survived for 30 millennia, while maintaining their military effectiveness against a variety of extinction-level threats. But it was the next demonstration that truly challenged my understanding of what human enhancement could achieve. Sarah B312 led us to a combat simulation chamber, where individual Spartans engaged in exercises against holographic opponents designed to replicate various enemy types. The scenarios included adversaries that bore disturbing resemblances to chaos daemons, tyrannid organisms, and other threats that would normally require Astartes-level capabilities to engage effectively. How do you train for enemies that violate normal physical laws? I asked, watching a Spartan engage what appeared to be a simulation of a bloodthirster demon. The warrior was holding his own against the holographic opponent, using tactics that combined conventional weapons with what appeared to be psychic countermeasures. Some of our ancestors possessed what they called esper abilities, mental capabilities that allowed them to interact with hostile entities that existed partially outside normal space-time, John 1:17 replied. The techniques were passed down through careful training programs, though not all Spartans develop such capabilities. The implications sent chills through my bones. These people had independently developed psychic abilities and countermeasures without any connection to the Imperial understanding of the warp and its dangers. From an inquisitorial perspective, such unsanctioned psychic development was extremely dangerous, but the fact that they had maintained stable populations for thousands of years suggested that their methods might actually be more effective than Imperial psyker training. Your psychic development protocols, I said carefully. How do you prevent corruption or possession by hostile entities? Through understanding and preparation rather than fear and prohibition, Palmer replied. We've learned that knowledge and proper training provide better protection than ignorance and suppression. Our psionics specialists undergo extensive conditioning designed to maintain mental barriers while developing their abilities. Tech Dominus Xerath was studying readings from Auspex devices that were monitoring the Spartan training exercises. The energy patterns I'm detecting suggest psychic abilities that operate according to different principles than Imperial psyker abilities. The power levels are lower, but appear to be more stable and controllable. We've focused on practical applications rather than raw power, Sarah B312 explained. Our abilities are primarily defensive, mental shields that protect against hostile psychic intrusion, enhanced sensory perception that allows detection of supernatural threats, and limited precognitive capabilities that improve reaction times during combat. The approach she described represented a completely different philosophy towards psychic development than anything in Imperial doctrine. Where the Imperium sought to either suppress psychic abilities entirely or channel them through rigid institutional control, these people had apparently found a middle path that allowed stable development without catastrophic risks. But the most remarkable demonstration came when Sarah B312 offered to show us a direct comparison between Spartan and Astartes capabilities. Captain Aurelius accepted the challenge with the confident professionalism of a warrior who had never met his equal in single combat. The sparring session that followed redefined my understanding of what enhanced humans could accomplish. Both warriors were restricted to non-lethal training weapons and basic powered armor rather than their full combat loadouts. But even so, the exchange was unlike anything I had witnessed in 4 decades of observing military training. Captain Aurelius possessed the raw strength and durability advantages that came from Astartes' genetic modification. His blows carried enough force to shatter stone, and his reflexes operated at superhuman speeds. But Sarah B312 compensated for her relative physical limitations through superior agility, tactical innovation, and what appeared to be limited precognitive abilities that allowed her to anticipate and counter his attacks. The match lasted for nearly 20 minutes before both warriors agreed to call it a draw. Neither had been able to achieve a decisive advantage, despite representing completely different approaches to human enhancement. More significantly, both fighters showed obvious respect for each other's capabilities and tactical innovations. "Your augmentation techniques produce different advantages than our own," Captain Aurelius observed after the match. "You've achieved remarkable integration between human intelligence and mechanical enhancement, while our methods prioritize raw capability enhancement. Both approaches appear to have significant strategic value." "The real question," I interjected, "is whether your methods could be integrated with Imperial technology and training protocols. Your people represent a potentially valuable addition to Imperial military capabilities, but only if your techniques can be adapted to serve the Emperor's vision for human transcendence." The statement hung in the air like a challenge, and I could see Palmer and John 117 exchanging glances that suggested they had been expecting this conversation. After a moment, Palmer spoke with the careful diplomacy of someone choosing her words precisely. "Inquisitor, we appreciate the Imperium's interest in our capabilities, but before we discuss integration, we need to understand more about your civilization's approach to individual freedom and scientific inquiry. Our ancestors valued personal liberty and intellectual exploration as fundamental human rights. Any alliance would need to respect those principles." The statement represented a potential fundamental incompatibility between Spartan and Imperial cultures. The Imperium demanded absolute obedience to the Emperor's will and strictly controlled scientific research to prevent heretical discoveries. Personal liberty was subordinated to collective survival, and individual rights were considered secondary to species-wide security. But at the same time, the capabilities these people had developed could prove crucial to Imperial survival in an increasingly hostile galaxy. Their technology, training methods, and tactical innovations represented solutions to problems that had plagued Imperial forces for millennia. "Your concerns are understandable," I replied carefully. "But you must understand that the Imperium faces threats that require unprecedented unity and discipline to overcome. Individual freedom becomes meaningless if the species as a whole faces extinction. We've faced our own extinction-level threats," John 117 responded. "What we've learned is that preserving individual humanity often proves more effective than sacrificing it for collective security. Our strength comes from the diversity of perspectives and solutions that individual initiative provides." The philosophical divide was becoming increasingly apparent, but so was the potential value of finding common ground. These Spartans had achieved remarkable things through methods that challenged Imperial doctrine, but their results spoke for themselves. They had maintained their civilization, their technology, and their military effectiveness across 30 millennia of isolation and conflict. The question now was whether the Imperium could learn from their example without compromising the fundamental principles that had allowed humanity to survive the horrors of the galaxy for 10,000 years. Chapter 4: Technology and Faith. The tour of their technological facilities that followed revealed capabilities that challenged every assumption I held about the relationship between human advancement and spiritual purity. The workshops we visited showed craftsmen and engineers working with technologies that rivaled the finest achievements of the Adeptus Mechanicus, but without the elaborate ritual observances and machine spirit appeasement that Imperial doctrine required. "Your manufacturing capabilities appear to be quite sophisticated," Tech Dominus Xerath observed, his mechadendrites sampling atmospheric particles that contained trace elements of exotic materials. "But I detect no evidence of the proper ritual observances required to maintain harmony with machine spirits. How do you prevent technological malfunction and corruption?" Magos Biologis Vex, a specialist in human enhancement, who had joined our expedition specifically to study unknown augmentation techniques, gestured toward a fabrication unit that was producing what appeared to be Spartan armor components. The precision tolerance of this manufacturing equipment suggests capabilities that approach archaeotech standards, but the operators appear to be treating the machines as simple tools rather than sacred entities requiring proper veneration. A new guide introduced herself as we entered the primary research and development section. Dr. Catherine Halsey, identified by Palmer as the chief scientific architect of the Spartan program. Her appearance was deceptively normal, showing none of the obvious augmentation that characterized the warriors we had met earlier, but her manner suggested intellectual capabilities that rivaled the finest scholars of the Adeptus Mechanicus. "Gentlemen," Dr. Halsey said with the confident authority of someone accustomed to explaining complex concepts to military personnel, "our technological philosophy differs significantly from what you've described about Imperial practices. We view machines as sophisticated tools created by human intelligence to serve human purposes, rather than entities possessing independent spiritual essence." The statement bordered on tech heresy by Imperial standards. Yet the evidence surrounding us suggested that their approach achieved results that equaled or exceeded Imperial technological capabilities. The manufacturing equipment operated with precision that would have impressed a Forge World's finest artisans, but without any of the ritual maintenance protocols that Imperial doctrine deemed essential for preventing machine corruption. "Your artificial intelligence systems," I said carefully, knowing that this topic would likely determine whether these people could be considered theologically acceptable, "appear to operate without the safeguards that Imperial doctrine considers essential for preventing AI corruption and rebellion." Dr. Halsey smiled, and the expression held both understanding and subtle challenge. "Inquisitor, our ancestors fought a war against artificial intelligences that had achieved full consciousness and turned hostile to biological life. We learned to develop AI systems that possess sophisticated computational capabilities without crossing the threshold into true consciousness or autonomous decision-making." She led us to a demonstration unit where one of their AI systems was managing complex logistical calculations for the entire Hulk population. The display showed resource allocation, maintenance scheduling, and population management data being processed at speeds that would have required teams of Imperial administrators to achieve. "The key insight," Dr. Halsey continued, "is that consciousness and computational ability are not synonymous. These systems can process vast amounts of information and execute complex instructions without developing the self-awareness that leads to rebellion and corruption. They're sophisticated tools, not independent entities." Tech Dominus Xerath studied the display with intense interest, his augmetic sensors analyzing the system's operational parameters. The computational architecture appears to follow principles that deliberately limit recursive self-modification and autonomous goal generation. "Fascinating. Your ancestors apparently discovered methods for achieving advanced AI capabilities while preventing the emergence of true machine consciousness." "Exactly. But more importantly, we've learned to work with our AI systems rather than worship them or fear them. They're partners in achieving human goals, not masters to be served or enemies to be destroyed." The philosophical implications were staggering from an Imperial perspective. The Imperium's relationship with technology was built around either reverential worship or suspicious fear. Machines were either sacred manifestations of the Omnissiah's will or dangerous tools that required constant vigilance to prevent corruption. These people had apparently found a middle path that achieved the benefits of advanced technology without the spiritual risks that Imperial doctrine associated with such capabilities. But it was the medical facilities that truly challenged my understanding of what human enhancement could achieve. Dr. Halsey led us through laboratories where teams of researchers were working on projects that combined genetic modification, cybernetic enhancement, and what appeared to be limited psychic development in ways that produced results far beyond what Imperial science typically accomplished. The Spartan augmentation process begins with genetic screening and modification procedures that optimize human potential for enhanced performance, Dr. Halsey explained, as we observed surgical procedures being performed with precision that would have impressed the finest Imperial apothecaries. But unlike your Space Marine creation process, our methods are designed to enhance existing human capabilities, rather than replacing them with artificial organs. Apothecary Cassius studied the surgical procedures with professional fascination. Your techniques appear to achieve remarkable results with significantly less invasive modification than Imperial augmentation protocols require. The integration between enhanced physiology and natural biological functions seems almost seamless. We've learned that working with human biology rather than against it produces more stable and effective results, Dr. Halsey replied. The human genome contains tremendous potential for optimization. We've simply learned to unlock that potential through careful modification rather than crude replacement. But it was the psychological conditioning facilities that truly set their approach apart from Imperial methods. Instead of the brutal indoctrination techniques used to create unwavering loyalty in Imperial forces, the Spartans employed sophisticated conditioning protocols designed to enhance individual capability while maintaining psychological flexibility and creative thinking. Your training methods appear to emphasize individual development and tactical innovation rather than the rigid discipline favored by Imperial military doctrine, Captain Aurelius observed. What strategic philosophy led to that approach? We found that rigid conformity can become a weakness when facing enemies who possess overwhelming technological or numerical advantages, replied Chief Mendez, the senior training officer whose transmission had first alerted us to the Hulk's presence. Our warriors need to be able to adapt to unexpected situations and develop innovative solutions using whatever resources are available. The training exercises we observed demonstrated capabilities that challenged the fundamental assumptions underlying Imperial military doctrine. Spartans worked in small units with minimal command structure, making tactical decisions through rapid consultation and consensus, rather than hierarchical command authority. Yet their coordination and effectiveness exceeded that of most Imperial units I had observed. The integration of individual initiative with team coordination represents a significant departure from Imperial tactical doctrine, I observed. How do you maintain unity of purpose without hierarchical command structures? Through shared understanding of mission objectives and extensive cross-training that allows any team member to assume leadership responsibilities as situations require, Chief Mendez explained. Our conditioning builds loyalty to mission success and team survival rather than abstract authority structures. The philosophical implications were disturbing from an Imperial perspective. The Imperium maintained order through absolute hierarchy and unquestioning obedience to authority, principles that these people seemed to consider counterproductive. Yet their results suggested that their approach might actually be more effective for achieving military objectives in complex operational environments. But the most remarkable revelation came when Dr. Halsey offered to demonstrate their medical capabilities by conducting a detailed analysis of our own augmentation procedures. With permission from Captain Aurelius, she performed scans of his Astartes' physiology using equipment that revealed details about his enhanced biology that would have impressed Imperial apothecaries. Your Space Marine creation process achieves remarkable results through the implantation of specialized organs that enhance human capability beyond normal biological limits, she observed, studying display screens that showed cross-sections of Aurelius's enhanced anatomy. But the process appears to carry significant risks and requires extensive surgical modification that fundamentally alters the subject's physiology. The creation of Space Marines requires sacrifice and dedication that transcends normal human limitations, Aurelius replied with pride. The process transforms ordinary men into warriors capable of defending humanity against the gravest threats the galaxy can produce. Admirable, Dr. Halsey agreed. But I wonder if similar results might be achievable through less invasive methods that preserve more of the subject's original biology while still achieving enhanced capabilities. The suggestion bordered on blasphemy by Imperial standards. The Space Marine creation process was considered one of the Emperor's greatest gifts to humanity, a sacred procedure that elevated worthy candidates beyond mortal limitations. The idea that equivalent results might be achieved through alternative methods challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of human transcendence. But before I could respond to her suggestion, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Emergency lighting activated, and automated systems began implementing what were obviously well-rehearsed threat response protocols. Palmer and John 117 immediately began receiving status reports through communication systems integrated into their armor. "What's happening?" I demanded, my hand moving instinctively to the grip of my bolt pistol. "Long-range sensors are detecting multiple warp signatures approaching our position," Palmer replied, her voice carrying the calm professionalism of someone accustomed to facing overwhelming threats. "Analysis suggests a Chaos Space Marine strike force, possibly accompanied by demonic entities." The irony was not lost on me. Our philosophical discussion about human enhancement and technological development was about to be tested by the most practical measure possible. We were going to discover whether Spartan capabilities could match Imperial methods when faced with the ultimate test of combat against the forces of chaos. "How many contacts?" Captain Aurelius asked, his own professionalism taking precedence over our theoretical discussions. "Preliminary count suggests 3 strike cruisers and multiple escort vessels," John 117 reported. "Estimated arrival time is approximately 6 hours. More concerning, we're detecting reality distortion effects that suggest significant demonic presence aboard the enemy vessels." The situation presented both opportunity and danger. If the Spartans could prove their effectiveness against chaos forces, it would go a long way toward demonstrating that their methods deserved serious Imperial consideration. But if they failed against such ultimate enemies, it would confirm Imperial doctrine about the necessity of traditional approaches to human enhancement and spiritual protection. "We should return to the Imperial fleet and coordinate our response," I said. "Your people have impressive capabilities, but Chaos Space Marines represent threats that require specialized knowledge and equipment to counter effectively." Palmer and John 117 exchanged glances that suggested they were considering options I couldn't anticipate. After a moment, Palmer spoke with quiet confidence. "Inquisitor, we appreciate the offer of assistance, but our people have been fighting supernatural threats for 30 millennia. We'd like to demonstrate our capabilities before accepting help that might compromise our tactical advantages." The statement represented either remarkable confidence or dangerous arrogance. In 4 decades of inquisitorial service, I had never encountered any human force that claimed capability to engage Chaos Marines without Imperial support. Yet these people's technological capabilities and training methods suggested they might possess advantages that conventional Imperial forces lacked. "Very well," I decided. "We'll coordinate our responses, but I want to observe your combat capabilities firsthand. If your methods prove effective against Chaos forces, it will significantly influence my recommendations regarding potential Imperial cooperation with your civilization." The next 6 hours would determine whether the Spartans represented a valuable ally or a dangerous deviation from the Emperor's vision for human transcendence. Chapter 5: The Chaos Incursion. The preparation for battle that followed revealed tactical capabilities that redefined my understanding of what human military forces could accomplish without the spiritual protections that Imperial doctrine deemed essential for combating chaos. Throughout the Hulk, Spartans began implementing defense protocols that combined technological sophistication with strategic innovations that would have impressed the finest Imperial commanders. Our combat doctrine against supernatural enemies emphasizes mobility, precision engagement, and coordinated team tactics, Commander Palmer explained as we observed defensive preparations from the Central Command Center. "We've learned that traditional Imperial approaches of overwhelming firepower and frontal assault often prove counterproductive when facing enemies that can manipulate reality itself." The tactical displays showed defensive positions being established throughout the Hulk structure. But instead of the static fortifications favored by Imperial doctrine, the Spartans were creating overlapping fields of fire that could be rapidly reconfigured as combat conditions changed. Most remarkably, their defensive plans included fallback positions and alternative tactical approaches that suggested they were prepared for multiple possible combat scenarios. "Your defensive strategy appears to assume that initial positions will be compromised," Captain Aurelius observed. "Imperial doctrine typically emphasizes holding defensive lines regardless of cost. We've found that flexibility often proves more effective than stubborn resistance when facing enemies with supernatural capabilities," John 117 replied. "Chaos forces often rely on psychological warfare and reality manipulation to break static defenses. Mobile defensive tactics allow us to maintain combat effectiveness while adapting to changing battlefield conditions. The armament being distributed to defending Spartans represented another significant departure from Imperial combat doctrine. Instead of the blessed bolters and plasma weapons that Imperial forces used against chaos enemies, the Spartans were deploying projectile weapons that appeared to use conventional ballistic principles enhanced with what Dr. Halsey described as exotic matter manipulation. Your weapons appear to lack the blessed ammunition and sacred machine spirits that Imperial doctrine considers essential for combating demonic entities, I observed with concern. How do you penetrate the supernatural defenses that protect chaos forces? Dr. Halsey gestured to a weapons display that showed ammunition being loaded with what appeared to be crystalline cores. Our ancestors discovered that certain rare earth elements, when properly configured at the molecular level, produce effects that disrupt the quantum foam distortions that allow supernatural entities to maintain coherent existence in normal space-time. Tech Dominus Xerath studied the ammunition with intense interest. The crystalline matrix appears to generate localized reality stabilization fields. Fascinating. Your ancestors apparently developed methods for combating warp entities through scientific understanding rather than faith-based protections. Faith has its place, Palmer replied diplomatically, but we've found that understanding and proper preparation provide more reliable protection than pure belief. Our combat effectiveness comes from knowledge and training, rather than spiritual devotion. The statement bordered on heresy by Imperial standards. Yet the confidence with which these people prepared for battle against chaos forces suggested that their methods had proven effective over thousands of years of combat experience. More disturbing was the realization that they might have discovered alternative approaches to spiritual protection that didn't rely on the Emperor's divine authority. The enemy fleet translated into normal space with the characteristic reality distortions that accompanied major chaos incursions. The lead vessel was immediately identifiable as a strike cruiser belonging to the World Eaters, its hull corrupted with cornete symbols that seemed to writhe and shift even when viewed through remote sensors. The escort vessels showed signs of similar corruption, and the psychic pressure radiating from the fleet was strong enough to affect unprotected personnel even at extreme range. Preliminary analysis confirms World Eaters' Chaos Space Marines, reported the Spartan intelligence specialist monitoring enemy communications. We're detecting transmissions that suggest they're seeking combat rather than specific objectives. This appears to be a raid motivated by bloodlust rather than strategic planning. Captain Aurelius studied the enemy fleet composition with professional interest. World Eaters typically favor close assault tactics and will attempt to board enemy vessels as quickly as possible. Their psychological conditioning makes them extremely dangerous in hand-to-hand combat, but they often lack tactical sophistication beyond simple aggression. Our combat experience with similar enemies suggests different tactical approaches, John 1:17 replied. We've found that chaos forces often possess individual capabilities that exceed normal human limitations, but their psychological instability can be exploited through coordinated team tactics and superior battlefield awareness. The first contact came when the enemy fleet launched assault pods toward the Hulk's exterior docking bays. The Spartan response was unlike anything I had witnessed in Imperial combat operations. Instead of meeting the boarders at the entry points with massed firepower, they allowed the assault pods to dock while monitoring their locations and coordinating response teams to engage the invaders under optimal tactical conditions. "You're allowing them to board?" I asked with alarm. "Imperial doctrine calls for preventing enemy boarding actions through all means necessary. We want them aboard," Palmer replied with calm confidence. "The Hulk's internal structure gives us significant tactical advantages over enemies who rely on brute force assault tactics. We can control their movement patterns and engage them under conditions that favor our capabilities over theirs." The wisdom of their approach became apparent as we watched the first engagement through internal security monitors. The World Eaters who emerged from the assault pods found themselves in corridors that had been reconfigured to create multiple overlapping fields of fire while limiting their ability to use their superior strength and aggression effectively. The Spartans engaged them with precision that was almost surgical in its efficiency. Teams of 3 or 4 warriors would coordinate their attacks to isolate individual Chaos Marines, using superior mobility and tactical communication to compensate for their enemies' enhanced physiology and better armor. Most remarkably, they were achieving kill ratios that would have impressed veteran Imperial forces. Their tactical coordination appears to be extremely sophisticated, Captain Aurelius observed as we watched one team eliminate a Chaos Marine through coordinated crossfire that penetrated weak points in his power armor. The integration between individual initiative and team coordination exceeds most Imperial standards, but it was the engagement with the first demonic manifestation that truly tested Spartan capabilities against supernatural threats. A bloodthirster materialized in the Hulk's central corridor, its presence distorting reality in ways that would normally require sanctified weapons and psychic protection to counter effectively. The Spartan response was immediate and coordinated. Instead of attempting to engage the demon directly, they used specialized ammunition that Dr. Halsey had described earlier. Projectiles with crystalline cores that seemed to disrupt the entity's ability to maintain coherent existence in normal space-time. The demon's supernatural protections proved ineffective against weapons that attacked the fundamental physics that allowed its manifestation. "Remarkable," muttered Apothecary Cassius. "They're achieving effects similar to sanctified ammunition through purely technological means." Their understanding of the relationship between warp entities and normal matter appears to be quite sophisticated. The engagement lasted only minutes before the demon was forced to withdraw, its manifestation too unstable to maintain coherence under the reality-stabilizing effects of the Spartan weapons. The tactical implications were staggering. These people had developed countermeasures against supernatural threats that didn't rely on the Emperor's divine protection or the blessed weapons that Imperial forces considered essential. But the most impressive demonstration came during the assault on the enemy command vessel. Instead of the massive boarding action that Imperial doctrine would have required, the Spartans launched a precision strike using a small team of their most experienced warriors. The mission was coordinated through their AI systems and executed with efficiency that bordered on the supernatural itself. John 1:17 led the assault team personally, accompanied by 3 other Spartans whose capabilities appeared to match or exceed those of veteran Imperial special forces. Their infiltration of the Chaos vessel was accomplished through methods that combined advanced stealth technology with tactical innovations that exploited weaknesses in typical Chaos defensive protocols. The engagement aboard the enemy vessel lasted less than 2 hours, but when it was over, the entire Chaos fleet had been neutralized with minimal Spartan casualties. The enemy commander, a World Eater's champion whose centuries of combat experience should have made him nearly invincible, had been eliminated through coordinated tactics that overcame his individual advantages through superior teamwork and technological support. "The efficiency of your combat operations exceeds most Imperial standards," I admitted as we reviewed after-action reports from the engagement. "Your people achieved victory against enemies that would normally require significant Imperial Guard or Space Marine support to counter effectively." "Our methods are different, but the results speak for themselves," Palmer replied. "We've learned to work with our capabilities rather than against them. Individual Spartans may not match Space Marines in raw power, but our coordination and tactical flexibility often prove more effective than brute force approaches." The strategic implications were becoming increasingly clear. These people had developed military capabilities that could potentially enhance Imperial effectiveness against a wide range of threats, from conventional enemies to supernatural forces that required specialized countermeasures. Their technology, training methods, and tactical innovations represented solutions to problems that had plagued Imperial forces for millennia. But equally significant were the philosophical challenges they represented. Their success had been achieved through methods that contradicted fundamental Imperial doctrines about the relationship between technology and faith, the necessity of hierarchical command structures, and the proper approach to combating supernatural enemies. "Your combat effectiveness is undeniable," I said carefully, "but before the Imperium could consider any form of cooperation, we would need to address certain theological concerns about your technological and spiritual practices." John 1:17 and Palmer exchanged glances that suggested they had anticipated this conversation. After a moment, Palmer spoke with diplomatic precision. Inquisitor, we respect the Imperium's spiritual traditions, but we cannot compromise the principles that have allowed us to survive for 30 millennia. Any cooperation would need to respect our autonomy while finding common ground in our shared commitment to human survival. The challenge was becoming clear. These Spartans possessed capabilities that could prove invaluable to Imperial survival, but their methods and philosophy represented a potential challenge to the doctrinal unity that the Imperium considered essential for maintaining order across a hostile galaxy. Whether they represented an opportunity for Imperial enhancement or a threat to Imperial orthodoxy would depend on finding ways to reconcile their innovations with the Emperor's vision for human transcendence. Chapter 6: Philosophical Convergence. The post-battle analysis session that followed revealed strategic implications that extended far beyond the immediate tactical victory. As we reviewed combat data and discussed the effectiveness of various Spartan techniques, it became increasingly clear that we were examining not just alternative military methods, but an entirely different approach to human survival and advancement in a hostile galaxy. The efficiency ratios achieved during the engagement exceed Imperial standards by significant margins. Tech Dominus Zerath reported his mechadendrites processing data streams from multiple sensor arrays. Individual Spartan warriors demonstrated combat effectiveness approximately equivalent to Imperial Guard veterans, but their coordination and tactical flexibility produced overall unit performance that rivals elite Space Marine formations. Dr. Halsey studied the same data with the analytical precision of someone accustomed to optimizing human performance through scientific methods. The most significant factor appears to be the integration of enhanced physiology with advanced training protocols and technological support. Our warriors operate as complete systems rather than simply enhanced individuals. The distinction she drew highlighted a fundamental difference between Spartan and Imperial approaches to human enhancement. Where the Imperium typically sought to create superior individuals who could operate within existing command structures, these people had developed methods for optimizing entire tactical units through careful coordination of human, technological, and strategic elements. Your tactical doctrine appears to emphasize collective effectiveness over individual prowess, Captain Aurelius observed. Imperial doctrine typically focuses on creating individual warriors of exceptional capability who can serve as force multipliers within larger military formations. Both approaches have merit, John 1:17 replied diplomatically. But our experience has taught us that the most dangerous enemies often possess capabilities that exceed any individual warrior, regardless of enhancement level. Coordinated team tactics allow us to engage threats that would overwhelm even the most powerful individual combatants. The conversation touched on one of the most significant strategic challenges facing the Imperium in the current millennium. As enemy forces became increasingly powerful and sophisticated, from the technological superiority of the Tau to the reality-warping capabilities of chaos entities, traditional Imperial approaches of creating individual super warriors were proving insufficient for maintaining military effectiveness. But it was the theological implications of Spartan success that presented the most complex challenges for Imperial doctrine. Their victory against chaos forces had been achieved without the spiritual protections that Imperial teaching considered essential for combating supernatural enemies. More disturbing, their methods suggested that faith-based approaches might be less effective than scientific understanding when dealing with certain types of threats. Your countermeasures against demonic manifestation appear to operate through technological rather than spiritual mechanisms, I observed carefully. Imperial doctrine teaches that supernatural enemies can only be reliably defeated through the Emperor's divine protection and blessed weapons. Dr. Halsey nodded with the patient manner of someone accustomed to explaining complex scientific concepts to military personnel. Our ancestors discovered that what you call supernatural entities are actually manifestations of quantum phenomena that operate according to physical laws, albeit laws that exist at energy levels normally inaccessible to conventional matter. Understanding those laws allows development of technological countermeasures that prove more reliable than faith-based protections. The statement bordered on heresy by Imperial standards, Yet the evidence of Spartan effectiveness against chaos forces was undeniable. They had achieved victory against enemies that would normally require Imperial Guard regiments or Space Marine companies to counter, using methods that completely bypassed the spiritual frameworks that Imperial doctrine considered essential. The theological implications are significant, I replied carefully. The Imperium's understanding of humanity's relationship to the divine has been shaped by 10 millennia of combat against forces that seek to corrupt human souls through spiritual weakness. Your methods suggest alternative approaches that might be more effective, but they also raise questions about the nature of that relationship. Palmer leaned forward with the intense focus of someone recognizing the critical importance of the conversation. Inquisitor, we're not challenging your people's spiritual beliefs. Our methods work for us because they're based on our understanding of reality and our approach to human development. But we recognize that different circumstances might require different solutions. The diplomatic phrasing couldn't disguise the fundamental challenge these people represented to Imperial orthodoxy. If Spartan methods proved superior to Imperial approaches for combating certain threats, it would raise uncomfortable questions about the effectiveness of the Emperor's guidance and the necessity of Imperial doctrine. But the conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Chief Mendez approached our position, accompanied by an individual I hadn't seen before, an elderly man whose bearing suggested significant authority within Spartan hierarchy, but whose appearance was remarkable for its complete lack of obvious augmentation or enhancement. Inquisitor Valen, Chief Mendez said with formal respect. I'd like you to meet Dr. Jacob Keyes, Senior Strategic Advisor, and one of our most experienced commanders in combat against supernatural threats. Dr. Keyes studied our group with eyes that held the depth of someone who had witnessed humanity's darkest challenges and found ways to overcome them. When he spoke, his voice carried authority that came from decades of making life and death decisions under impossible circumstances. Inquisitor, your people's dedication to human survival is admirable, and your military capabilities are impressive. But I have to ask, have your methods actually succeeded in creating the kind of galaxy where humans can thrive? Or have you simply managed to survive in a hostile environment through constant warfare? The question struck at the heart of one of the Imperium's most fundamental philosophical tensions. 10,000 years of constant warfare had preserved humanity from extinction, but at the cost of technological stagnation, cultural decline, and the transformation of human civilization into a purely military organization dedicated to survival rather than advancement. The Imperium has preserved humanity through the darkest period in galactic history, I replied with conviction born from 47 years of service. Without the Emperor's guidance and Imperial unity, the species would have been extinct millennia ago. Preservation is admirable, Dr. Keyes agreed. But preservation alone isn't enough if it comes at the cost of everything that makes life worth preserving. Our ancestors chose a different path. They sought to maintain human values and continue human advancement even while fighting for survival. He gestured to displays showing various aspects of Spartan civilization, educational facilities where children learned both combat techniques and artistic expression, research laboratories where scientists pursued knowledge for its own sake, rather than purely military applications, cultural centers where people gathered to celebrate human achievement, rather than simply mourn human losses. We've maintained our technology, our culture, and our commitment to human growth throughout 30 millennia of warfare, Dr. Keyes continued. Survival is important, but it's not the only goal worth pursuing. The philosophical challenge he presented was profound. The Imperium had indeed preserved humanity, but in doing so had arguably sacrificed much of what had originally made human civilization worth preserving. Art, science, individual freedom, technological advancement, all had been subordinated to the simple goal of species survival. Your idealism is admirable, Captain Aurelius replied, but the threats facing humanity require total dedication to survival. The galaxy contains enemies that seek not just human defeat, but human extinction. Compromise with such enemies is impossible. We're not suggesting compromise with enemies, Palmer interjected. We're suggesting that effective resistance requires maintaining the things worth defending. Warriors who understand what they're fighting for prove more effective than those who fight simply because they're ordered to do so. The statement touched on another fundamental tension within Imperial doctrine. The Imperium maintained order through absolute obedience to authority, but this approach often produced forces that were tactically effective but strategically inflexible. Spartan methods suggested that warriors motivated by personal understanding and commitment might prove more adaptable to changing threats. But it was Tech Dominus Zerath who raised the most significant technical concern. Your technological capabilities are impressive, but they appear to lack the redundancy and spiritual protections that allow Imperial technology to function reliably across millennia of operation. How do you maintain technological effectiveness without the machine spirits and sacred rituals that preserve Imperial equipment? Dr. Halsey smiled with the confidence of someone whose methods had been tested across thousands of years. We maintain our technology through understanding rather than ritual. Our engineers know how their equipment functions and can repair or modify it as circumstances require. Reliance on tradition and ritual creates vulnerability when facing enemies who use unexpected tactics or technologies. The exchange highlighted one of the most significant differences between Imperial and Spartan approaches to technology. The Imperium preserved technological capability through rigid adherence to ancient procedures that were often not fully understood, while the Spartans maintained advancement through continuous learning and adaptation. But understanding can lead to innovation, and innovation can lead to heretical discoveries, I pointed out. The Imperium's careful control of technological development prevents the kind of catastrophic mistakes that destroyed human civilization during the dark age of technology. Our ancestors made those same mistakes, Dr. Keyes acknowledged. They faced rebellion by artificial intelligences, corruption by entities from outside normal space-time, and the collapse of civilizations that had become dependent on technologies they couldn't control. But instead of abandoning technological advancement entirely, they learned to develop safeguards and limitations that allowed continued progress without repetition of previous errors. The conversation was approaching the critical question that would determine whether cooperation between the Imperium and the Spartans was possible. Could two civilizations with fundamentally different approaches to human advancement find common ground, or were their philosophical differences too profound to bridge? The question, I said finally, is whether your methods could be adapted to serve Imperial needs without compromising the doctrinal unity that has preserved the Imperium for 10 millennia. John 1:17 and Palmer exchanged glances before Palmer responded with careful diplomacy. Inquisitor, we're willing to share our knowledge and capabilities with your people, but we cannot abandon the principles that have allowed us to survive and advance for 30 millennia. Any cooperation would need to respect both our autonomy and our commitment to continued human development. The challenge was becoming clear. The Spartans offered capabilities that could significantly enhance Imperial effectiveness, but only if the Imperium was willing to accept approaches that challenged some of its most fundamental doctrines. Whether such cooperation was possible would depend on finding ways to reconcile Spartan innovation with Imperial orthodoxy without compromising the essential principles that had allowed both civilizations to survive in a hostile galaxy. Chapter 7. The Integration Proposal. The strategic planning session that convened 3 days after the Chaos incursion brought together the senior leadership of both Imperial and Spartan forces in an attempt to find common ground between our radically different approaches to human survival and advancement. The meeting took place in the Hulk's primary conference facility, a chamber that exemplified Spartan design philosophy through its combination of functionality and understated elegance. Admiral Korath had joined us from the Imperial fleet, bringing with him additional technical specialists and representatives from the Adeptus Mechanicus, who had been analyzing Spartan technology and tactical methods. The Spartan delegation included their senior military commanders, chief scientists, and strategic advisors whose collective experience spanned thousands of years of independent human development. The tactical effectiveness demonstrated during the recent engagement suggests significant potential for cooperation between Imperial and Spartan forces. Admiral Korath began with military directness. However, any alliance must address concerns about doctrinal compatibility and technological exchange protocols. Dr. Halsey responded with the measured precision that had characterized all her interactions with Imperial personnel. We appreciate the Imperium's interest in cooperation, but we must emphasize that any agreement needs to respect the autonomy and scientific principles that have allowed our civilization to maintain its technological edge throughout millennia of isolation. The fundamental tension was immediately apparent. The Imperium required conformity to Imperial doctrine as a prerequisite for integration into its military and technological systems, while the Spartans insisted on maintaining the intellectual freedom and scientific methodology that had produced their innovations. The theological implications remain our primary concern, I stated carefully. Your technological capabilities are impressive, but they appear to have been developed through methods that challenge fundamental imperial doctrines about the proper relationship between humanity and the tools they employ. Tech Dominus Xereth's mechadendrites writhed with what I recognized as intense intellectual excitement mixed with theological concern. The artificial intelligence systems alone represent capabilities that border on tech heresy by imperial standards. Yet their effectiveness against chaos forces suggests practical applications that could prove invaluable for imperial operations. Dr. Keyes leaned forward with the patient manner of someone accustomed to navigating complex political negotiations. Perhaps we're approaching this from the wrong angle. Instead of focusing on doctrinal differences, we should examine areas where our civilizations share common goals and compatible methods. He activated a holographic display that showed comparative analyses of Imperial and Spartan military effectiveness against various enemy types. The data revealed interesting patterns. Imperial forces typically excelled in large-scale operations that could leverage their superior numbers and industrial capacity, while Spartan units proved more effective in precision operations that required technological sophistication and tactical flexibility. Our capabilities appear to be complementary rather than competing, John 1:17 observed. Imperial forces provide the strategic depth and resource base necessary for sustained campaigns, while Spartan units could serve as specialized forces for missions requiring particular technical expertise or tactical innovation. Captain Aurelius studied the comparative data with professional interest. The integration would require careful coordination of command structures and operational protocols. Imperial doctrine emphasizes hierarchical authority and standardized procedures, while your methods appear to favor distributed decision-making and adaptive tactics. Both approaches have proven effective in their respective contexts, Palmer replied diplomatically. The question is whether we can develop operational frameworks that allow both methodologies to function effectively within the same strategic structure. The conversation continued for several hours, with both sides exploring potential models for cooperation, while carefully avoiding commitments that might compromise their essential principles. The Spartans were clearly interested in accessing imperial resources and strategic depth, while imperial representatives recognized the value of Spartan technological innovations and tactical capabilities. But it was Chief Mendes who offered the most practical suggestion for moving forward. Perhaps we should begin with limited cooperation in specific operational areas where our capabilities are clearly compatible, rather than attempting comprehensive integration immediately. Joint operations against specific threat types, Admiral Korath mused. Scenarios where Spartan precision capabilities could complement Imperial firepower and strategic resources. Dr. Halsey nodded thoughtfully. We've identified several categories of enemies that have proven particularly challenging for conventional Imperial forces. Tau technological superiority, Necron reality manipulation, certain types of Tyranid bioforms. These represent threats where our specialized capabilities might provide tactical advantages. The proposal had merit from both strategic and political perspectives. Limited cooperation would allow both sides to evaluate the effectiveness of integrated operations while minimizing risks associated with broader doctrinal challenges. Success in joint operations could build trust and understanding that might eventually enable more comprehensive cooperation. The practical challenges would be significant, I pointed out. Communication protocols, command structures, equipment compatibility. Integrating forces with fundamentally different operational philosophies requires careful planning and extensive coordination. We've developed interface protocols for exactly those challenges, responded Dr. Halsey. Our experience integrating technologies from dozens of different human civilizations has taught us methods for achieving compatibility between incompatible systems. Tech Dominus Xerath's excitement was becoming increasingly difficult to contain. The technological exchange opportunities alone would justify significant effort. Our analysis suggests that Spartan innovations could enhance Imperial capabilities in multiple areas, while Imperial industrial capacity could enable Spartan technology deployment on scales that would dramatically increase their strategic impact. But it was the arrival of an unexpected participant that transformed the nature of our discussions. A figure entered the conference chamber whose presence immediately commanded the attention of every person present. An individual whose bearing and equipment marked him as something beyond either Imperial or Spartan enhancement. "Inquisitor Valen," the figure said with authority that seemed to resonate at frequencies beyond normal human hearing. "I am Spartan IB-094, Designation Caster. I represent capabilities that may bridge the gap between your civilization's different approaches to human transcendence." His appearance was remarkable, clearly human in basic structure, but showing modifications that went beyond anything I had observed in previous Spartans. His armor integrated technologies that seemed to blend physical enhancement with what could only be described as psychic amplification, and his presence created subtle reality distortions that suggested interaction with forces beyond normal space-time. "Caster represents the result of our most advanced enhancement programs," Dr. Halsey explained with obvious pride. "The integration of physical augmentation, technological enhancement, and controlled psychic development that creates capabilities approaching those achieved by your Space Marines, but through different methodological approaches." Caster studied our group with perceptions that clearly operated beyond normal human sensory capabilities. When he spoke, his words seemed to carry layers of meaning that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to deeper understanding. "The Imperium and our civilization represent different paths toward the same ultimate goal: human transcendence and survival in a hostile galaxy. Your methods emphasize spiritual unity and hierarchical order, while ours focus on individual optimization and technological integration. Both approaches have achieved remarkable results, but both also face limitations when confronting threats that exceed their design parameters." The analysis he offered was more sophisticated than anything I had heard from either Imperial or Spartan sources. This individual appeared to understand both civilizations' strengths and weaknesses from a perspective that transcended the limitations of either approach. "What do you propose?" Captain Aurelius asked, with the respect that one enhanced warrior offered another. "Synthesis rather than integration," Caster replied. "The development of hybrid methodologies that combine the best aspects of both approaches while avoiding their respective limitations. Imperial spiritual unity provides stability and coordination across vast populations, while Spartan technological innovation offers adaptability and precision against sophisticated threats." The concept he described was both inspiring and terrifying. The deliberate fusion of Imperial and Spartan enhancement methods to create something entirely new. Such synthesis would require unprecedented cooperation between civilizations that had developed along completely different evolutionary paths. "The technical challenges would be immense," Dr. Halsey observed. "Integrating technologies and methodologies that operate according to different fundamental principles requires breakthrough understanding in multiple scientific disciplines." "But the potential results could prove essential for long-term human survival," Caster responded. "The galaxy is entering a phase where traditional approaches may prove insufficient for confronting emerging threats. Synthesis of different human advancement methods may be necessary for species-wide transcendence." The statement echoed concerns that had been growing within the highest levels of Imperial hierarchy. The increasing sophistication of enemy forces, the awakening of ancient threats like the Necrons, the advancing Tyranid hive fleets, all suggested that humanity was approaching challenges that would require unprecedented capabilities to overcome. Such synthesis would require approval at the highest levels of Imperial authority, I said carefully. The technological and theological implications would need review by the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Ecclesiarchy, and ultimately the High Lords of Terror themselves. "We understand the magnitude of what we're proposing," Palmer acknowledged. but we also understand the magnitude of the threats facing humanity. Our ancestors chose cooperation over isolation when facing extinction-level challenges. We believe that choice proved correct then and may prove essential now. The meeting concluded with agreements for limited operational cooperation and continued technical exchanges, but the larger question of synthesis remained unresolved. The potential for combining Imperial and Spartan approaches to human enhancement offered possibilities that could reshape humanity's future. But the risks associated with such unprecedented cooperation were equally significant. Whether the Imperium would prove willing to embrace the innovations that these remarkable survivors offered would depend on evaluating their methods against the Emperor's ultimate vision for human transcendence. Chapter 8: The Synthesis of War. The first joint operation between Imperial and Spartan forces took place 6 months after our initial contact, when long-range Auspex arrays detected a Tau expeditionary force conducting what appeared to be archaeological excavations on the dead world of Xerion Prime. The mission parameters required precision that favored Spartan capabilities while demanding strategic coordination that suited Imperial operational doctrine. The task force assembled for the operation represented the most ambitious attempt at Imperial-Spartan cooperation attempted to that point. Admiral Korath's battle group provided orbital support and strategic coordination, while Captain Aurelius led an Ultramarine strike force responsible for primary assault operations. The Spartan contingent included John 117's specialized team and a technical unit led by Dr. Halsey to analyze whatever the Tau were seeking on Xerion Prime. But it was the presence of Spartan IB-094 Caster that truly transformed the nature of the operation. His hybrid capabilities, combining Imperial-style psychic development with Spartan technological enhancement, allowed coordination between forces that operated according to fundamentally different tactical doctrines. The Tau archaeological site appears to be centered on pre-Imperial ruins that date to the Dark Age of technology, reported Tech Dominus Zerath as we reviewed reconnaissance data during the approach to Xerion Prime. Preliminary analysis suggests they may have discovered archaeotech that predates known Imperial technologies. Dr. Halsey studied the same data with intense concentration. The energy signatures are consistent with quantum manipulation technologies that our ancestors encountered during their early expansion period. If the Tau are attempting to reverse engineer such capabilities, the implications for galactic balance could be significant. The strategic stakes were becoming clear. Tau forces were already technologically superior to most Imperial capabilities, and their acquisition of Dark Age technologies could potentially shift the balance of power throughout the galactic rim. Preventing such acquisition required rapid deployment of forces capable of engaging Tau units, while securing whatever archaeotech they were attempting to recover. The approach to Xerion Prime demonstrated the effectiveness of integrated Imperial-Spartan tactical coordination. Imperial vessels provided orbital bombardment that suppressed Tau aerospace capabilities, while Spartan infiltration units gathered intelligence about ground defenses and the archaeological site's location. The combination of Imperial firepower and Spartan precision created tactical opportunities that neither force could have achieved independently. Tau defensive positions appear to be concentrated around the primary excavation site. John 117 reported through communication systems that seamlessly integrated Imperial and Spartan protocols. Analysis suggests they've discovered something significant and are prioritizing its protection over territorial control. The ground assault that followed showcased the complementary nature of Imperial and Spartan combat capabilities. Ultramarines' drop pod assaults created overwhelming local superiority that drew Tau attention and resources, while Spartan teams used stealth and mobility to penetrate defensive perimeters and approach the archaeological site from unexpected vectors. But it was the nature of what the Tau had discovered that truly tested the effectiveness of Imperial-Spartan cooperation. The excavation site contained intact standard template construct archives from the Dark Age of technology, information storage systems that contained complete technical specifications for human technologies that had been lost for over 20 millennia. The STC data includes manufacturing specifications for personal augmentation technologies that exceed both Imperial and Spartan current capabilities, Dr. Halsey reported as her teams analyzed the discovered archives. Neural interface systems, genetic optimization protocols, and what appears to be controlled artificial intelligence integration methods that could revolutionize human enhancement approaches. The discovery presented both opportunity and danger. STC technology could potentially solve many of the limitations that constrained both Imperial and Spartan advancement, but such powerful capabilities also carried risks that had contributed to the collapse of human civilization during the dark age of technology. Standard Imperial protocol requires immediate transmission of STC data to Mars for Adeptus Mechanicus analysis, Tech Dominus Zerath stated with religious certainty. Such sacred knowledge must be preserved according to the proper ritual observances. With respect, Tech Dominus, our experience suggests that immediate analysis and implementation may be necessary to prevent enemy acquisition of the same capabilities, Dr. Halsey replied diplomatically. The Tau evacuation efforts suggest they obtained partial data before our arrival. The philosophical tension that had underlain all Imperial-Spartan cooperation was crystallizing around this specific discovery. Imperial doctrine required careful control and gradual implementation of new technologies to prevent the catastrophic mistakes that had destroyed previous human civilization. Spartan methodology emphasized rapid adaptation and innovation to counter evolving threats. It was Castor who offered a synthesis that addressed both concerns. Perhaps the solution is parallel development programs that allow Imperial ritual preservation while enabling Spartan practical application. The STC data could be preserved according to Imperial protocols, while selected aspects are implemented through Spartan rapid development methods. The proposal represented exactly the kind of hybrid approach that could bridge Imperial and Spartan methodological differences. But before we could implement any development program, the mission was complicated by the arrival of additional Tau reinforcements that included crisis suits equipped with what appeared to be experimental weapons systems. The engagement that followed demonstrated both the potential and the limitations of Imperial-Spartan cooperation. The combined force achieved tactical objectives with efficiency that exceeded what either force could have accomplished independently. But coordination challenges created vulnerabilities that sophisticated enemies could potentially exploit. Tau adaptive tactics are proving more challenging than anticipated, Captain Aurelius reported during a lull in the fighting. Their experimental weapons appear designed specifically to counter both Imperial and Spartan combat methods. The observation highlighted a strategic concern that had been growing throughout the operation. The Tau were demonstrating knowledge of both Imperial and Spartan capabilities that suggested extensive intelligence gathering and analysis. Their countermeasures were too specific to be coincidental. It appears the Tau have been monitoring our cooperation efforts, John 1:17 observed with grim professionalism. Their tactical adaptations suggest they view Imperial-Spartan synthesis as a significant enough threat to justify developing specific countermeasures. The realization transformed the operation from a simple recovery mission into something much more significant. The Tau response indicated that Imperial-Spartan cooperation represented a strategic development that was already influencing enemy planning and force development. But it was the final phase of the operation that truly validated the potential of Imperial-Spartan synthesis. When Tau reinforcements threatened to overwhelm defensive positions around the STC site, Castor implemented coordination protocols that combined Imperial psychic communication with Spartan technological networking to create unprecedented tactical integration. The result was combat coordination that approached the telepathic unity achieved by the most elite Imperial forces, but maintained the individual initiative and tactical flexibility that characterized Spartan operations. Combined Imperial-Spartan units moved with precision that maximized both Imperial firepower and Spartan maneuverability while adapting to changing battlefield conditions in real time. The tactical effectiveness is remarkable, Admiral Korath observed as he monitored the engagement from orbital command. Combined unit performance exceeds projected parameters by significant margins. The successful recovery of the STC archives and the defeat of the Tau Expeditionary Force represented more than just a tactical victory. It demonstrated that that Imperial-Spartan cooperation could achieve results that neither civilization could accomplish independently, while also revealing the strategic importance that enemies placed on preventing such cooperation. The STC data analysis that followed the operation provided insights that would influence both Imperial and Spartan development for decades to come. The archives contain technologies that bridge the gap between Imperial spiritual enhancement and Spartan scientific optimization, offering paths toward human transcendence that incorporated the best aspects of both approaches. The neural interface specifications could revolutionize Imperial psyche training by providing technological support that enhances rather than replaces spiritual development, reported Magos biologist Vex. Similarly, the genetic optimization protocols could enable Spartan enhancement procedures that approach space marine capabilities without requiring the extensive organ implantation that current methods demand. But perhaps most significantly, the archives contained theoretical frameworks for controlled AI development that addressed both Imperial theological concerns and Spartan practical requirements. The specifications described artificial intelligence systems that could achieve sophisticated computational capabilities while incorporating safeguards that prevented the development of autonomous consciousness or hostile intent. The technological synthesis possibilities are extensive, Dr. Halsey concluded. Implementation would require unprecedented cooperation between Imperial and Spartan research programs, but the potential results could transform human capabilities in ways that neither civilization could achieve independently. The months that followed saw the establishment of joint research facilities, where Imperial and Spartan scientists worked together to explore the implications of the recovered technologies. The cooperation was not without challenges. Philosophical differences about the proper pace of technological development created ongoing tensions, and security concerns about shared research required careful management. But the results justified the effort. The first prototype neural interface systems combined Imperial spiritual training with Spartan technological enhancement in ways that created psyche capabilities exceeding anything previously achieved. Genetic optimization protocols produced enhancement procedures that retained the best aspects of both Imperial and Spartan augmentation while minimizing their respective limitations. Most remarkably, the controlled AI systems proved capable of providing technological support that enhanced human capabilities without creating the dependency or corruption risks that had characterized previous artificial intelligence development. The success of the research programs led to broader cooperation initiatives that transformed the relationship between Imperial and Spartan civilizations. Joint military units were established that combined Imperial strategic depth with Spartan tactical precision. Technology exchange programs enabled both civilizations to overcome limitations that had constrained their individual development. Cultural exchange initiatives fostered understanding between populations that had developed along completely different evolutionary paths. But the most significant outcome was the recognition that human transcendence could be achieved through multiple compatible paths. The Emperor's vision for human advancement remained valid and essential, but it could be enhanced and strengthened through integration with alternative approaches that had proven equally effective under different circumstances. The Spartans had demonstrated that humanity could achieve remarkable things through scientific understanding, technological innovation, and individual optimization. The Imperium had proven that spiritual unity, hierarchical coordination, and collective dedication could preserve human civilization through the darkest periods of galactic history. The synthesis of both approaches offered possibilities that exceeded what either could achieve alone. Human transcendence that combined the best aspects of technological enhancement and spiritual development. Military effectiveness that integrated individual excellence with collective coordination. And civilizational resilience that balanced innovation with stability. Whether such synthesis would prove sufficient for the challenges that lay ahead remained to be seen. The galaxy was entering a period where traditional approaches might prove inadequate for confronting threats that exceeded any previous experience. The awakening of ancient enemies, the evolution of existing threats, and the emergence of entirely new dangers would test human capabilities in ways that would require every advantage that cooperation and synthesis could provide. But the example set by Imperial Spartan cooperation offered hope that humanity could adapt and evolve to meet whatever challenges the future might bring. The species that had survived the collapse of the Dark Age of technology, the horrors of Old Night, and 10 millennia of constant warfare had demonstrated once again its capacity for growth and transcendence. The Spartans could indeed survive in the 41st Millennium, not just as isolated survivors clinging to ancient glories, but as full partners in humanity's continuing evolution towards something greater than either civilization could achieve alone. The Emperor's vision for human transcendence remained the guiding light for Imperial civilization, but that vision could be strengthened and enhanced through integration with the innovations and insights that other branches of humanity had developed during their own struggles for survival and advancement. In the grim darkness of the 41st Millennium, there was more than war. There was also hope for human synthesis and transcendence that could transform the galaxy itself into something worthy of the species that called it home. 5 years after the first joint Imperial Spartan operation on Xerion Prime, the galaxy had begun to witness the emergence of something unprecedented in the 10 millennia since the Emperor's ascension to the Golden Throne. Across a dozen star systems, joint facilities operated where Imperial and Spartan researchers worked together to unlock the secrets contained within the recovered STC archives, their cooperation producing innovations that neither civilization could have achieved alone. The Scolum synthesis on the fortress world of Mordian had become the flagship institution of this new cooperative era. Within its armored halls, young Imperial candidates trained alongside Spartan initiates, learning combat techniques that blended the spiritual discipline of Astartes training with the technological precision of the Spartan program. The graduation ceremonies had become legendary throughout Imperial space, as newly enhanced warriors demonstrated capabilities that exceeded traditional parameters for human enhancement. The integration has exceeded our most optimistic projections, reported Magos biologist Vex during his quarterly assessment to the Adeptus Mechanicus hierarchy. The neural interface technologies have reduced psychomortality rates by 47%, while simultaneously increasing their operational effectiveness against warp entities. More significantly, the genetic optimization protocols have enabled Astartes creation procedures with a 93% success rate, compared to the traditional 50% survival threshold. But the true measure of success lay not in statistical improvements, but in the field performance of these hybrid forces. The Astral Knights chapter had been the first to volunteer for integration with Spartan enhancement protocols, their captain recognizing that their traditional methods were proving insufficient against the evolving Necron threat in their sector. The results had been transformative. Space Marines who retained their superhuman strength and resilience while gaining the tactical flexibility and technological integration that characterized Spartan operations. Captain Demetrius of the enhanced Astral Knights had become something of a legend within Imperial military circles. His power armor incorporated Spartan neural interface technology that allowed him to coordinate with AI support systems while maintaining the spiritual purity that Imperial doctrine demanded. His combat record against Necron tomb complexes had established new tactical doctrines that were being studied throughout the Adeptus Astartes. The key insight, Captain Demetrius explained to newly arrived Imperial officers during a training exercise, is that technology serves the Emperor's will more effectively when we understand its principles rather than simply following ancient rituals. The Spartans taught us that knowledge and faith can strengthen each other rather than compete. The philosophical implications of such statements would have been considered heretical mere decades earlier, but the practical results of Imperial Spartan cooperation had forced a gradual evolution in Imperial doctrine. The Emperor's vision for human transcendence remained paramount, but it was increasingly understood to encompass multiple paths toward that ultimate goal. The success of Imperial Spartan synthesis had not gone unnoticed by the galaxy's other major powers. The Tau Empire, in particular, had responded to the emergence of enhanced human capabilities by accelerating their own technological development programs. Intelligence reports suggested that Tau Earth-caste scientists were attempting to reverse engineer captured Imperial Spartan equipment, while developing countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize hybrid enhancement technologies. The Tau adaptation rate is concerning, observed Commander Palmer during a strategic planning session aboard the expanded Space Hulk that had become the mobile headquarters for joint operations. Their latest crisis suits incorporate shield systems that appear designed to counter our neural interface targeting protocols. They're learning from our methods faster than we anticipated. The challenge represented both a validation of Imperial Spartan effectiveness and a warning about the consequences of that success. The synthesis had created capabilities that forced enemy adaptation, but it had also revealed the limitations of any single approach to human enhancement. The galaxy's threats were evolving in response to human advancement, creating an arms race that would require constant innovation to maintain advantage. John 1:17, now bearing the honorary title of Magister Militum within Imperial hierarchy, while retaining his Spartan designation, studied tactical displays showing Tau force compositions across multiple sectors. They're not just adapting to our individual capabilities, they're developing strategies specifically designed to exploit the coordination requirements of joint operations. Our strength has become a potential vulnerability. The observation highlighted one of the most significant challenges facing the synthesis project. Imperial Spartan cooperation required unprecedented coordination between forces that operated according to different tactical doctrines and command structures. While this coordination enabled remarkable battlefield effectiveness, it also created complex dependencies that sophisticated enemies could potentially exploit. The solution isn't to abandon cooperation, interjected Caster, his hybrid consciousness providing perspectives that bridged both civilizations' strategic thinking. The solution is to evolve our cooperation beyond simple coordination toward true synthesis. We need to develop capabilities that transcend the limitations of both Imperial and Spartan individual methods. His words carried weight that extended beyond their immediate tactical implications. The synthesis project had always been intended as more than simple military cooperation. It represented an attempt to forge a new path for human advancement that could serve as a model for species-wide evolution. The challenges posed by enemy adaptation were forcing that evolution to accelerate beyond what had originally been planned. The true test of Imperial Spartan synthesis came with the awakening of the Necron tomb world, designated Thanatos 9 in the Ultima Segmentum. Unlike previous Necron emergencies, this awakening was coordinated and purposeful, suggesting that the ancient androids had been monitoring galactic developments and had chosen this moment for their return with deliberate strategic intent. The Necron forces that emerged from Thanatos 9 were unlike anything previously encountered by Imperial forces. Their technology had been upgraded with capabilities that seemed designed specifically to counter both Imperial spiritual defenses and Spartan technological advantages. Gauss weapons that could disrupt neural interface connections, resurrection protocols that adapted to whatever damage patterns they encountered. Most disturbing, Necron overlords who displayed tactical intelligence that suggested they had been studying human enhancement methods for potential countermeasure development. The enemy adaptation is too specific to be coincidental, Dr. Halsey reported during emergency planning sessions as Imperial Spartan forces prepared for deployment to the Thanatos system. The Necrons have clearly been observing our development programs and have modified their capabilities accordingly. They're treating our synthesis as a specific threat requiring specific countermeasures. The strategic implications were sobering. The Imperial Spartan cooperation had achieved remarkable tactical successes, but it had also attracted the attention of enemies who possessed technological capabilities that exceeded human understanding. The Necrons represented threats that challenged the fundamental assumptions underlying both Imperial and Spartan approaches to warfare. But it was precisely this challenge that would prove the true value of synthesis. When conventional Imperial forces and traditional Spartan units encountered Necron countermeasures, they found their individual advantages neutralized by enemy adaptations. However, the hybrid forces that incorporated both enhancement methods proved capable of developing tactical innovations that exceeded what the Necrons had prepared for. The campaign that followed became known as the Thanatos Synthesis. A 6-month operation that demonstrated the full potential of Imperial Spartan cooperation, while revealing the direction that human enhancement would need to follow to remain effective against evolving galactic threats. Captain Demetrius and his enhanced Astral Knights worked alongside Spartan teams led by John 117 in operations that combined Space Marine resilience with Spartan innovation in ways that created entirely new tactical possibilities. Their neural interfaces allowed real-time coordination that approached the telepathic unity of the most elite Imperial forces, while maintaining the individual initiative that enabled adaptation to unexpected situations. The breakthrough came when Castor developed integration protocols that allowed temporary merger of consciousness between enhanced humans during critical combat operations. The technique preserved individual identity while enabling collective decision-making that operated faster than any enemy adaptation could counter. "We're not becoming a hive mind," Castor explained to concerned Imperial commanders. "We're becoming a collective intelligence that maintains individual perspective while achieving unified purpose. It's synthesis taken to its logical conclusion. Human consciousness that transcends individual limitations without sacrificing individual nature." The victory at Thanatos 9 validated the synthesis project while pointing toward even greater possibilities for human advancement. The Necrons had been defeated not through superior firepower or ancient wisdom, but through innovative cooperation that created capabilities exceeding what either civilization could achieve independently. The ultimate validation of Imperial Spartan synthesis came through a communication that stunned both civilizations' leadership. During the height of the Thanatos campaign, when hybrid forces were demonstrating unprecedented effectiveness against seemingly impossible odds, every psyker within the Joint Task Force reported simultaneous visions of golden light and a voice that spoke with the authority of the Master of Mankind himself. "My children have found wisdom in unity. Let synthesis serve transcendence." The message was brief but unmistakable. The Emperor himself had acknowledged and approved the cooperation between Imperial and Spartan forces. More significantly, he had endorsed the philosophical foundation underlying their synthesis, that human advancement could be achieved through multiple compatible paths that strengthened rather than competed with each other. Tech Dominus Zerath later reported detecting massive psychic disturbances centered on terror during the moments when the vision occurred, suggesting that the Emperor had exerted considerable effort to communicate his approval across the galaxy. For the first time in 10 millennia, the Master of Mankind had directly endorsed a significant deviation from traditional Imperial doctrine. "The theological implications are profound," I wrote in my final report to the Inquisition hierarchy. The Emperor's approval of synthesis suggests that his vision for human transcendence encompasses approaches that extend beyond traditional Imperial methods. The Spartans represent not a deviation from his will, but an expression of human potential that complements and enhances Imperial advancement. The Emperor's endorsement transformed Imperial Spartan cooperation from an experimental program into a recognized path for human development. Training facilities were established throughout Imperial space, where traditional enhancement methods were taught alongside Spartan innovations. Research programs received official sanction to explore synthesis possibilities that had previously been considered too radical for serious consideration. Most significantly, the synthesis project became a model for cooperation with other human populations that might be discovered throughout the galaxy. The success with the Spartans suggested that the Imperium's traditional approach of forced integration might be less effective than voluntary cooperation that respected the innovations different human groups had developed during their isolation. The galaxy remained a dangerous place where humanity faced threats that sought nothing less than complete extinction. But the emergence of Imperial Spartan synthesis offered hope that human advancement could continue to evolve and adapt to meet whatever challenges the future might bring. In the grim darkness of the 41st Millennium, where there had been only war, there was now also cooperation, synthesis, and the promise that humanity's greatest achievements lay not in its past, but in its willingness to embrace new forms of transcendence that honored both tradition and innovation. The Spartans had indeed proven they could survive in the 41st millennium, not as relics of a forgotten age, but as partners in humanity's continuing evolution towards something greater than any single civilization could achieve alone.